Chapter 923. The timid people had already started to cry. The scene of the holy flames burning was a fatal blow to their morale. How will we know if we don't try? Zhou said without hesitation. At such a time he had no choice but to make a desperate attempt. He could not care less. It was like forcing a duck onto a perch. Even for a man like Tang Tian, who had enemies under the heavens, upon thinking about the countless holy flames in the sky being absorbed by a group of spirit generals, he could not help but feel his scalp go numb. Tang Tian initially thought that they were just nourishment for the spirit generals. But after that he realized that he had underestimated the great clan elder. The holy flames were continuously converting the energy into radiant energy, and to the disciples of the aristocratic families who trained in the inheritances of their families, it meant that the amount of energy they could control was gradually decreasing, which was similar to the forbidden hoop's reduction of energy activity. By changing the density of the air, it could achieve the goal of confinement. By lowering the energy activity, it would form a swamp effect. With the two effects stacked together, it was extremely effective against sacred Saint Galaxy martial artists. When Xia heard that, her eyes lit up. What do you think? Tang Tian finally understood the source of the strange familiarity, the forbidden hoop. Tang Tian and the rest also felt the immense pressure. As time passed, the situation would become more and more disadvantageous to them. If they were unable to successfully decipher the secret of the holy flames before the great clan elder's spirit general hatched, they would be finished. Tang Tian did not have the time to think about all of that. He was in trouble. He had a rough understanding of the Saint Continent system, but he realized that he was helpless. The great clan elder's system was superior to the forbidden hoop, in that the amount of holy flames used was too terrifying. Without caring about it, he shouted, "Then let me try. I can't do it alone. Two people come and help me." Previously, when he fought with the Honorable Martial Banner of Knights, Tang Tian had specially researched on the holy flames. The holy flames were flames that were birthed from pure radiant energy, and in temple there were strict requirements for the training of the holy flames. This was the Saint Continent, where temple was located, the center of the entire Honorable Martial Continent, and the majority of the citizens were related to temple. Thus the majority of them were able to train in the holy flames. In any of the other continents, the holy flame was definitely not as widespread. The member called Xiao Yao smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, I cultivate the law of light, but it has nothing to do with the law of light." In reality, the alliance of the big clans no longer had a chance to turn the tables. They did not expect that before they could come up with a plan, their enemies were already scheming on how to wipe them out. The densely packed holy flames continued to convert the energy in the air into radiant energy. As the available energy in the air became thinner and thinner, Sadra and his army's losses increased rapidly. They felt like fish out of water, suffocating. The energy barrier that was usually easy was now unusually heavy and difficult. Every fiery pillar's position had been carefully chosen, which meant that Temple had planned this from the start. Alright, what was he worrying about? He was actually worried about the Great Elder? The 500 over holy flames from the fiery pillars resonated at the same time, producing an undulation that enveloped the entire Saint Continent, which was why it was able to form a fiery screen that enveloped the entire Saint Continent. The forbidden hoop was the first technique that caught Tang Tian's interest after he entered the Honorable Martial Continent. The forbidden hoop was created by Claudia's bodyguard leader, Hank. In the entire sacred Saint Galaxy, Hank's name was not well known, but the forbidden hoop that he created was extremely mystical, causing Tang Tian's eyes to light up. Tang Tian's research and usage of it was even more daring and creative. He was able to form a similar forbidden hoop around his body, isolating his own energy undulations. He used his own enlightenment on the forbidden hoop to appear and disappear unpredictably in the battlefield like a ghost. It could be said that the two were on completely different levels of power. But when Tang Tian linked the two together, he immediately realized that the two were similar. The great clan elder's only oversight was that he did not expect Tang Tian and his group to barge in. A lunatic was not scary, but a strict and meticulous lunatic was scary. With Tang Tian's current strength, there were very few enemies that required him to use such a method to fight. Even in temple, the number of people that could surpass him in strength could be counted with one's fingers. His research on the forbidden hoop was more of an interest in its creativity, and he rarely used it. So when he researched on the pillars of punishment, he did not even think about the forbidden hoop. Everyone's eyes turned to look at Xiao Yao and the rest. Of course, the pillars of punishment was much more complicated than the forbidden hoop. However, in a sense, some of the principles of the two were quite similar. With the experience of dismantling the forbidden hoop, Tang Tian quickly gained something. For example, he initially thought that the forbidden hoop was formed by the pillars of punishment and the holy flames in the sky, but now he changed his judgment. Furthermore, the might of the two were on completely different levels. When Tang Tian was trapped by the forbidden hoop, he was actually rather calm. Jizai did not care about anything else. I do not know what honorable martial laws are, but it definitely has a law. Could it be related to light laws? Xiao Yao, you practice the law of light, right? Even the dense holy flames floating in the sky was an important part of the forbidden hoop, and was the great clan elder's hidden killing move. Such a huge and cold-blooded plan was not an impulsive move, but a meticulous plan that was closely linked. The great clan elder's ruthless and cold-blooded nature caused people to tremble in fear. Because of the undulations produced by the fiery pillar's resonance, the holy flames spewed into the sky, but did not dissipate, but flowed along the sky, forming a layer of fiery screen. It was not difficult to form such a fiery screen. As long as an army was not weak, they would be able to do it. But to envelop an entire continent, and a continent as large as the Saint Continent, Tang Tian had never heard of such a thing before. If not for being trapped inside, Tang Tian would have long turned and run. The might of the golden holy flames was not ordinary, and if it was a one-on-one fight, no matter how powerful the holy flames were, Tang Tian would not be worried. But the holy flames in front of him were formed from the lives of the entire Saint Continent, and were as vast as the ocean. No one could resist against so many holy flames. It was like an ocean, and with a wave Tang Tian would be annihilated. And if the holy flames were to explode, the entire Saint Continent would be annihilated. Its might was something that even the sea of energy, which could contain all living things, was unable to contain. The sea of energy would be ignited, and the uncontrollable explosion and energy would form an unprecedented energy tsunami that would sweep through the entire honorable martial continent. In the end, no one knew how many continents would be able to escape this calamity. Just the thought of such a scene was enough to make one's hair stand. He had tested out the might of the pillars of punishment, and the terrifying pressure that came from the sky caused him to feel fear. It was extremely rare to find a power that could cause Tang Tian to feel fear. The forbidden hoop was extremely creative, but in terms of the essence of the power, it was not worthy of praise. Tang Tian could not help but admire the great clan elder. The Saint Continent was a vast region, and to completely seal it off, the position of the 500 over fiery pillars was extremely crucial. He had to admit that the concept was flawless. It was complete and tight. In the Saint Continent, the holy flames were viewed as the symbol of piety, and were viewed as the purest and most sacred power, and the battle techniques and killing techniques that revolved around the holy flames formed an extremely large system. Jizai immediately said, "Send 5 people. The holy flames are born from energy. Is it energy? Or is it a type of law?" The resonance between the holy flames. Jizai's situation was much better than Fu Jingji. He could still think. The other energies are decreasing, but the radiant energy is increasing. Can we use the radiant energy? When the quantity of something reaches a critical point, it will undergo a qualitative change. Furthermore, it is a high-level holy flame that is extremely dangerous. But the quantity of the holy flame is a qualitative change. The 500 over pillars of punishment was the skeleton of the forbidden hoop system, and also the foundation. Its most important use was not to provide holy flames, but to resonate. The God Armor Army was bitterly maintaining the energy barrier, but the pressure on everyone was increasing, causing the members to reveal signs of fatigue. Jizai saw that the situation was not good and clenched his teeth. "We can't continue like this. Do you have any ideas?" Fu Jingji was already gasping for breath. His talent and strength were much weaker than Jizai, and he was much older than Jizai, so he felt as though he was being sucked dry. The excessive consumption of law caused the blood and qi in his body to become restless, and he was starting to show signs of losing control. Tang Tian took a deep breath. He was starting to feel anxious. When was the last time I felt anxious? He had long forgotten about it. But today he truly felt anxious, although he knew that the great clan elder would definitely not ignite the holy flames. But with such a vast amount of holy flames, even the great clan elder might not be able to control them. There were many imperfections between the fiery pillars and the fiery screen, but the vast amount of holy flames had completely drowned all of these imperfections. Tang Tian and the rest had brought about a change to the complete and rigorous plan. That was also why, from the moment the great clan elder made his move, he had firmly grasped the initiative in the battlefield. What kind of monster will the strength of the entire Saint Continent's citizens gather on a few hundred people? Tang Tian was unable to imagine it. Fu Jingji was startled. He was startled by Ji Zai's whimsical thoughts. Temple's forbidden hoop system was formed from 3 parts: the pillars of punishment, the holy flames flowing in the sky, and the holy flames floating in the air. Tang Tian suddenly realized that all of the problems had returned to the starting point: holy flames. The atmosphere in Mace Field Tradings was extremely tense. Xiao Yao knew that the situation was dire. The energy barrier required the power of laws to maintain, and if this continued, they would only be able to hold on for half an hour before the energy barrier would shatter, and everyone would be drowned by the holy flames. Their hearts trembled at the thought of being touched by the holy flames. In the sacred saint galaxy that was filled with dense and abundant energy, more than 90% of the people had never experienced the feeling of sparse energy before. The great clan elder's move could be said to be pulling out the firewood from under the cauldron. It struck their vitals, and they were completely unable to find a way to deal with it. 5 members who still had strength walked to Xiao Yao's side. The decrease in numbers caused the energy barrier to tremble, and the members who were maintaining the energy barrier felt their bodies becoming heavier, and the pressure on them increased. Tang Tian laughed at himself, but the nervousness in his heart was alleviated. He started to focus his attention once again, discarding all of the distracting thoughts. So be it, holy flames or holy flames, I have seen many strange and bizarre things, and there are many holy flames. Tang Tian fell into deep thought. He sat down beside the fiery pillar. Chapter 924. The holy flames in the sky resembled snowflakes, and also resembled dandelions that were blown by the wind. It was extremely beautiful. The 12 spirit generals bowed respectfully and walked out in a line. I have already prepared sufficient food for all of you. You can all eat your fill. The great clan elder's voice pierced through the holy flames, as though he was talking about something extremely normal. The great clan elder spoke loudly. Go enjoy the feast of the honorable martial saint, and enjoy the process of becoming a god. These few days will be unforgettable for all of you. Oh, my apologies, all of you no longer have the word forever. Sophie's body trembled involuntarily for some reason. The scene in front of her caused her to feel fear. The great clan elder nodded his head in satisfaction. He was extremely satisfied with the 12 spirit generals in front of him. The situation was much better than what he had imagined. The honorable martial banner of knights were extremely powerful, and their holy flames had been trained to a rather profound realm. Thus the success rate of conversion was much higher than what he had expected. He was completely in awe of the creator of the holy flame. The golden flames were extremely unique. Its most unique aspect was that it had many different forms, and under certain conditions the holy flame could change between different forms. For example, it could become extremely tyrannical or violent. But at certain times, its nature was extremely gentle and could heal injuries. But most of the time, it would display a gentle temperament. Sophie laughed at herself. I am truly living in this world. What qualifications does a spirit general have to say such words? In the end, the great clan elder did not forget to crack a joke. It showed that he was in a good mood. Honorable martial saint. The sea of energy outside the Saint Continent was filled with warships and merchant groups. Everyone was extremely anxious. They had heard of the fight between Temple and the prestigious families, but they never expected that the Saint Continent would actually be sealed. The golden holy flames were like terrifying beasts that occupied the estuary. But what made Dooku the most surprised was that it was not energy, nor was it laws. The battle in the desolate continent had ended, and no one in the honorable martial continent would think about the desolate corner. Without the battle, Dooku, who was relaxed, decided to move and head to the Saint Continent to support Tang Tian. Dooku was knowledgeable and tactful. When the holy bell rang, he guessed that Tang Tian would most likely head to the Saint Continent. Dooku was also extremely interested in the Saint Continent. Temple was their mortal enemy, and the Saint Continent was Temple's headquarters, thus he wanted to experience it. She stared blankly at the sky, feeling disgusted. However, Duke was not rash at all. He did not rush in impatiently. Dooku immediately made the decision. Regardless of the price he had to ensure Tang Tian's safety. Even if he had to pay with his life, he would not hesitate. Maybe temple will be rebuilt, that's right, just like what the great clan elder said, it will be a new temple, a temple that has nothing to do with me. The 12 spirit generals bowed. All of the estuaries of the Saint Continent were blocked so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Ultimately, Dooku was a peerless martial artist who had gained enlightenment on law domains, and his understanding of laws and the myriad of things in the world far exceeded that of an ordinary person. He even boldly cut off a strand of holy flame and carefully studied it. Very quickly he had some gains. It was the first time he had encountered a flame like the holy flame, and he roughly understood the Tao inside. What a unique thing. From today onwards, all of you are the 12 honorable martial paladins of temple. Her heart sank to the bottom. She maintained her silence and did not say a word. Walking in temple, the once bustling temple was now empty. It was indescribably lonely and spacious. She stopped and looked at the empty temple and could not help but sigh. She could not understand, if there are no people left, then what's the point of rebuilding temple? All of the familiar faces in the past were no longer there. Her mood became gloomy. She quickened her footsteps. She did not want to stay any longer. When Dooku rushed over, he saw the entire scene. But what made Dooku feel helpless was that not only did they not help Tang Tian, but instead received Tang Tian's care, and felt that they owed him more and more favors. The great clan elder casually said, "They only need to remember what they need to remember. They will get to know each other in the future." The great clan elder was satisfied and in high spirits. Although the 12 spirit generals did not seem to be a lot, but they all retained their intellect and each of them could hold their own. They were the most elite honorable martial banner of knights when they were alive, and all of them had gone through layers and layers of selection. All of them were brimming with talent. Regardless of whether it was their individual strength or battle accomplishments, they were all outstanding. After transforming into spirit generals, their talents were preserved, but their strength would increase by over 10 times. At the start, there were still many warships that relied on the outstanding defense of the warships to charge in. But after more than 10 of the warships were incinerated, no one dared to charge in anymore. A few of them were still waiting for someone to come out and negotiate with them. Regardless of who had the upper hand, at least someone would come out and speak. But they waited for day and night, but no one came out to negotiate with them. "Yes," Sophie replied softly and walked out. Chapter 926. At that moment, everyone had absolute trust in Tang Tian. Tang Tian was moved, but he was not overly sentimental. "Jizai, all of you hold on, I need some time." Tang Tian initially thought that the image was a unique law thread because the shape of the image was in the shape of a line, and was exactly the same as a law thread. Tang Tian was extremely familiar with law threads, and knew that the shape of the image was truly the shape of a law thread. In truth, Tang Tian also felt that it was a daring idea. A ball of gentle white light aura lit up from his palm. The ball of light grew at a speed visible to the naked eye, causing beads of perspiration to form all over his face, and very quickly the ball of light became the size of a millstone. Everyone in the trading organization watched anxiously. Such a huge ball of light contained an astonishing amount of energy, and if it were to explode, the consequences would be unthinkable. Although the idea was extremely risky, but in theory it had a high chance of success. Of course, with the hatred that the holy flame had towards Tang Tian's god armor, they had to think of other ways to carry out the plan. But in the battle of life and death, if they did not take any risks, then they would just have to wait for death. The benefits and risks would always be proportional. Furthermore, it was already a miracle that they could find a way. And it was all thanks to Tang Tian that they could use such a method. Jizai clenched his teeth and nodded. "Master, rest assured." From a certain perspective, spirit generals were similar to the product of an intermediate state, a special state between life and death. To a spirit general, the holy flame was a great nourishment. Tang Tian did not have the habit of making things difficult for himself. Although time was tight, but Tang Tian was still well rested and did not rush to start. He knew that only when he was in the most perfect state would there be a chance of success, and if he did not have enough stamina, he would only make things worse. If it wasn't a misconception, then what was it? But very quickly Tang Tian rejected that guess. He carefully recalled the details that he had captured in that instant and had many new discoveries. The unique form bestowed it with a unique nature. After Tang Tian gave his orders, he did not speak anymore but sat down cross-legged. He needed time to recover his stamina. The exhaustion was too great and he still needed to use the god armor. Without stamina he would not be able to activate it. Tang Tian trusted his own senses. His intuition was extremely sharp, and was able to catch many details that even he himself did not notice, which had been proven in countless of battles. And the only obstacle for Xiao Ran and the rest to absorb the holy flame was the light attribute of the holy flame. The pure light energy was an extreme type of energy, and to spirit generals, it was a poison. Although the radiant energy within the holy flames had been turned ethereal, and its tyrannical and masculine nature had undergone a huge change, but it still retained many of the characteristics of the radiant energy. Xiao Yao's state of mind was calm and slowly of Xiao Tian. Moreover, during this period of rest he carefully deliberated over the specific ideas and details. Then hurry up and start. We don't have much time, Exen said without hesitation. The mysterious figure's shape truly resembled a law thread. The only difference was that it was a reflection. That's right, Tang Tian remembered the feeling clearly. Especially at the moment when the dotted lines and law threads clashed, the feeling was extremely obvious. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely think that they were seeing things. How can there be a reflection of law threads? Time ticked by, but Tang Tian's eyes remained closed and his body remained motionless. Tang Tian could imagine how overjoyed the great elder must have been when he discovered this strange structure. After persevering, Tang Tian finally understood why he felt that the dotted lines were like reflections of law threads. The dotted line was indeed a mysterious and indescribable state. Although the law threads were hard to see with the naked eye, but they were superimposed on the space, while the illusory figure was the exact opposite. They were below the space. Using carvings as an analogy, law threads were yang carvings while the dotted lines were yin carvings. Suddenly Xiao Yao spat out a mouthful of blood. He flew backwards as if he had been hit by a heavy hammer. His mind worked quickly. Xiao Ran and the rest were unable to endure the remnant radiant attribute in the holy flame, but he could. With his tyrannical physique, forget about the hollowed radiant energy. Even without the hollowed radiant energy he was not afraid. On this point even Dooku was unable to compare to him, showing how terrifying his physique was. The white light membrane that covered the energy barrier shattered like glass. If they did not have a terrifying physique, they would simply be seeking death. And if they did not have the god armor's tyrannical control over laws, they would similarly be seeking death. But the efficiency of absorbing the hollowed radiant energy in the air was too low. Temple's spirit generals could directly absorb the holy flames, while Xiao Ran and the rest could only absorb the thin hollowed radiant energy. Thus the difference in their speed of growth was like heaven and earth. Because of that, they were in a dangerous situation. Towards unfamiliar energy, the more it was, the easier it was for problems to arise, and the density of the energy outside had already reached a terrifying level. It was Tang Tian's first time seeing the yin carving law threads, and he was surprised. Very quickly, the white light extended to more than half of the energy barrier. His next action surprised everyone. He threw out a spirit card. From the moment she was in danger, she had always been calm. She felt that there was nothing to worry about as long as Big Brother Tian was here. She did not know why she would have such a thought. Maybe it was because when they were young, Big Brother Tian had always acted as a hero and stood in front of her. She had always been full of confidence in Tang Tian, completely without any reason, just like how Tang Tian, who only knew fundamental martial techniques, was a joke in the academy, but she still felt that Big Brother Tian was very powerful. Just like how they did not have any vows of undying love, but she was always filled with hope and confidence for their future. It was just that unreasonable. The golden figure in the sky opened up his arms like a war god. There was no such thing as an invincible power in the world. Any power would have its own shortcomings and limitations. To project the laws into the energy and then use the yin carving laws to turn the energy into a void, fundamentally changing the nature of the energy. This had already broken away from the scope of techniques, just like how the holy flames could no longer become energy, nor could it become a law. It was a brand new, never-before-seen power, and that was the true power of the great clan elder. Creating a technique and creating a type of power, the two were on completely different levels. Tang Tian's orders could be said to be brazen, but Ji Zhe and the rest did not hesitate and immediately removed the energy barrier. Everyone opened their eyes wide and looked at Tang Tian with curiosity and anticipation. Zhou and the rest naturally knew of their boss's abilities, but Xian Xiao Ran and the rest had never seen Tang Tian's true abilities. Previously at the Qiu Offense Institute, Tang Tian was about to go on a killing spree, but in the end, Xian stole the limelight, and everyone saw Xian's magnificent performance. It was a gold rank spirit card. It landed 10 in front of Tang Tian, and floated in the air unmoving. Tang Tian's movements were extremely fast, as rays of gold light shot out from his chest. In the blink of an eye he was surrounded by spirit cards, all of which were gold rank spirit cards. He instructed Xian and Xiao Ran to stand below him and the spirit cards, and then got them to sit cross-legged. Tang Tian was speechless. That means I lost everything. I have to go back and thank Pai Pak, Tang Tian thought. But all of these regrets disappeared in the blink of an eye. As long as Big Brother Tian is here, godlike young lad. Including himself, everyone was going to die here. The Southern Alliance had lost the war and would be swallowed by Temple, Three Spirits City and Ursa Major Constellation's fate would also fall into the abyss. Everyone had gone through so many battles, everyone had persevered and struggled, and the results would all disappear with this loss. Both parties were fighting to the death, although Tang Tian admired the great clan elder, but at the moment his mind was filled with thoughts on how to defeat the enemy. Even if I can't do it, dying together with Big Brother Tian is also a form of fortune. He was like a dragon that had been slumbering for 10,000 years, and had just been awoken and could not wait to display his will to the world. When everyone followed Tang Tian's orders and entered their positions, they all quietened down. Using all of their strength, igniting all of their passion without holding anything back, disregarding everything, they told themselves the answer they wanted. The great clan elder had absolute confidence in his holy flame, and all of his plans revolved around the holy flame. His confidence was not arrogance. It must be known that after promoting the holy flame for so many years, no one had ever discovered the secret of the holy flame. Regardless of whether it was the clan elders of Temple or the enemies of Temple, all of them thought that the holy flame was a secret technique of Temple, and that the great clan elders' training was the most profound. Go go go. When they were resting, Tang Tian had always been perfecting his thoughts. The densely packed gold-grade spirit cards floated around Tang Tian, flickering with gold light, like a golden ripple. The positions of the spirit cards had been meticulously arranged by Tang Tian, and not a single one touched the holy flame. Tang Tian opened his eyes, and in his abstruse eyes, there were flames blazing. The great clan elder would never have thought that there would actually be such a freak like Tang Tian in the world. The hollowified energy had to remain, and the virtual laws in the holy flame had to be removed. Godlike young lad. The only thing that could nourish spirit generals was the hollowified energy. Tang Tian had never seriously researched on spirit generals before, but he had many spirit generals by his side, and had his own understanding of spirit generals. In a sense, spirit generals were also existences that were hollowified. That was also why spirit generals were unable to directly absorb energy to strengthen themselves. Pray. A cold glint flashed past Tang Tian's eyes. All of the holy flames that resembled jellyfish were completely unaware that they had become prey in Tang Tian's eyes. It was as though a storm was rumbling in his heart, as though the sun was shining down on him, just like when he was young. When Tang Tian opened his eyes, the light aura of the energy barrier had dimmed, and was on the verge of collapse. Only half of the God Armor army was still standing, the exhausted members were lying on the ground, close to fainting. The pattern on the ground seemed familiar to him, as though he had seen it somewhere before. This strange sense of familiarity disappeared in a flash. When he thought about it carefully, he couldn't remember anything. It was much easier for Temple's spirit generals to absorb the holy flames. The compatibility between the two was extremely high, and they could absorb it effortlessly. All of Temple's spirit generals were transformed from Honorable Marshal Banner of Knights, and the Honorable Marshal Banner of Knights had trained in the holy flames for decades, and the holy flames were like a part of their bodies. When they transformed into spirit generals, they retained this instinct. She leapt into the golden sea of holy flames. This fiery pillar was thicker and more robust than all the other fiery pillars, and the holy flames were even more ferocious. Within the flames, a blurry figure stared blankly at the thick pillar of fire. Sophie watched as they stepped into the surging holy flames. She sighed, and without hesitation she stepped into the fiery pillar. Her body was submerged by the holy flames, and she did not know what she would look like after a few days. Do you still remember Charles? Do you still remember everyone? The golden flames suddenly danced wildly, the great clan elder scolded loudly, but after scolding he stopped and only whimpers remained in the flames. The golden flames stopped in front of Charles's grave. Only when he saw Sophie enter the fiery pillar did he turn and leave. Xian finally remembered what the familiar pattern was. In the past there were many energy houses in the army encampment. He had not figured out what the energy houses were used for, but he had already sensed that something was amiss and immediately shouted, "Hey hey hey, I am actually a staff officer, staff officer, staff officers are clerks, clerks do not go to the front lines." Xian and Xiao Man looked at each other, and noticed the seriousness and shock in each other's eyes. The two of them had discussed about Tang Tian's strength before, and even if the two of them teamed up, they might not be able to defeat Tang Tian. The two of them were intelligent people. Tang Tian's performance was different from usual, which meant that the situation was more complicated, and the pressure that Tang Tian had to bear. But Xian and the rest were different. What was useful to Xian and the rest was the holified energy. And the law projection in the holy flames was like poison to them. If they were to forcefully absorb it, they might unknowingly become Temple's spirit generals. He caressed the tombstone and sighed, "Child, rest well." An unprecedented and powerful temple was about to be born from his hands. A grand era was about to be born from his hands. The figure that stepped into the fiery pillar disappeared. The resolute and decisive words floated in the lonely wind. He firmly believed. Gradually, more and more golden light scattered down. Chapter 929. Without hesitation, he immediately guided a holified energy sword aura from the wind screen towards the holy flame. The moment the sword aura struck the holy flame, it exploded into countless of energy pearls as though it was raining. Although Chia knew that Tang Tian had suffered a lot in the past few years, but hearing Sima Zhao's words, she still felt an indescribable pain in her heart. Chia immediately ignored Xian and the rest who were screaming. Her gaze was fixated on the golden figure above the tornado, and she could not shift her gaze away. Without a sound, the two were destroyed at the same time. "Yes, it is the Whirlpool Sword Storm," Sima Zhao explained. "It originates from the Whirlpool Sword's spirit tempering technique, and is a technique that uses sword concept to temper the martial spirit." In Tang Tian's hands, it flourished and the Whirlpool Sword became the Whirlpool Sword Storm, which Tang Tian trained in when he was in the Ursa Major constellation, and in the end used it to kill a saint. The holified energy in the air slowly converged towards the core of the emulated laws, and in the next moment, a strand of holy flame appeared in front of Tang Tian. The newly formed holy flame was much dimmer than before and the flames were much smaller. The most praiseworthy thing about the holy flame was its thought process and creativity, and not its techniques towards laws and energy. Since there was no way to separate the two, then he would destroy the balance between the two, using laws to break through the holified energy and collide with the emulated laws. When the two collided, it would cause them to be destroyed and Tang Tian would be able to obtain the pure holified energy. This was the most exhausting step, but it was also a step that could not be missed. Xian felt as though he was about to fly. The feeling was too satisfying, something he had never experienced before. Tang Tian immediately had the urge to cry. "I can't continue like this." Of course it might not be easy, but it was ultimately a feasible method, and it was the only method that Tang Tian could think of in such a short period of time. As for the risks, Tang Tian could not be bothered about it at the moment. Tang Tian was surprised, but very quickly he thought about it. The sensitivity and powerful control of laws meant that he could do all sorts of experiments, and that was the most powerful aspect of the awakened God armor. All sorts of experiments and the relationship between the various laws were of great help to him in understanding the laws. This advantage was something that even Dooku, who had a law domain, could not achieve. If Dooku knew of the miraculous use of the awakened God armor, he would probably be drooling on the spot. When they heard the wails coming from inside, they immediately looked like they had expected it. The unique characteristics of the awakened God armor did not help Tang Tian much in understanding a particular law, but in terms of understanding the relationship between laws, and understanding the origin of laws, it had an unparalleled advantage. If he truly did that, it meant that he would have to face the sword auras, the astonishing number of sword auras. Tang Tian's usage of the god armor was not only for fighting. To him, the sensitivity and control of laws to the extreme was not for fighting but for training. Xian was puzzled. It's not painful and there's nothing for me to endure. Tang Tian looked at the scene below him. Until now, everything was still in his control. Sword. In the moment of life and death, a person's potential would be stimulated to the maximum, and that was the easiest time to break through. Although it was extremely dangerous to use battle to nurture battle, but it was a widely recognized concept. But the flash of inspiration in the moment of life and death was all built on perseverance and bitter training. Without the deep accumulation, it was impossible to have a flash of inspiration in the moment of life and death. Xian's body suddenly froze. A sharp pain spread from his thigh to his entire body. He was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted, and let out a heart-wrenching scream. They pierced through the layer of golden light released by the spirit cards and poured down like rain. When the light landed on the spirit generals, they immediately permeated into their bodies, and all of the spirit generals were roused. Xian and Xiaoran were elated. They could feel their bodies becoming stronger. Without needing his orders, all of the spirit generals were busy receiving more holified energy. But there was too much holified energy, and although they received a lot of it still fell to the ground. Tang Tian, who had his arms wide open, carefully experienced the law threads that were drifting in the air. Suddenly, his eyes lit up with a cold light. He clenched his 10 fingers together and grabbed the air, causing the flickering light auras to appear in his palms. The cruelest thing in the world is this. Tang Tian did not know what was happening outside, and as for the screams and howls below, he did not feel the slightest bit of sympathy. Back then, when I was in a living hell, those assholes were actually listening to me with interest. Now it's my turn to be interested. What shocked everyone even more was that the wind screen vortex was continuously expanding, and an endless stream of holy flames surged in from all directions. The wind screen vortex became bigger and bigger, and the sword cries became clearer and clearer. What if there's an external force? That's too awesome. Endure it for the master to say that. It's such a terrifying word. Xian's stupefied mind only had one thought: asshole, that guy is speaking the truth. The immense pressure caused even Tang Tian, who was in the state of his god armor, to feel the suffocating pressure of MT Tai. His hands did not slow down at all, and his brain was operating at high speeds. What do I do? Chi. Tang Tian did not give up. He was thinking with all his might and carefully recalled what was the most difficult part of handling the holy flames. Which step took up the most time? This question only flashed through his mind for a moment. The pressure he was under was greater than he had expected. The holy flames were hostile towards laws, and he needed to wrap the law threads with a layer of energy, and the layer of energy had to be neither thick nor thin, able to protect the law threads through the outer layer of the holy flames, and not obstruct the law threads from clashing with the emulated laws at the core of the holy flames, causing the two to be destroyed. There were more and more sword auras, to the point that they were even more concentrated than raindrops. Under the guidance of the windscreen, they revolved at high speeds. The sharp whistling sounds became even more gloomy, and became even more terrifying, causing people's scalps to go numb. The sword auras that revolved at high speeds were like a capstan of swords. The sharp sword concept pressed down from all directions, causing Xiaoran to feel as though she was about to be grinded into pieces. She even felt as though her body was being torn apart. The intense pain pierced through her heart, but before she fainted, the hollowified energy continued to replenish and repair her body. Destroying is also much easier than constructing. The holy flames became sluggish. The emulated law threads appeared, and one of the law threads firmly pierced into their core. The holy flame's structure was extremely stable. The emulated laws and hollowified energy had achieved a miraculous balance. This balance was extremely stable, and the two mutually influenced each other. It was almost impossible to directly extract the emulated laws from the holy flames. Alright, Tang Tian is still far away from that, far beyond my reach. But what he was using now was his usual comprehension, his understanding of laws. The gloomy and soul-stirring whistling sound was unable to cover the heart-wrenching screams coming from within, causing Zhou and the rest to be frightened to the point that their faces turned pale. In truth, when Tang Tian had reminded Xian and the rest, Zhou and the rest had already rejoiced in their misfortune. They were extremely clear on how terrifying the master's measure of pain was. But if Xian knew about it, he would definitely crawl out of the windscreen even if he was beaten to death. Tang Tian was fully focused on handling the holy flames. The dispersing holified energy slowly floated towards the core of the emulated laws. As time passed, Tang Tian could clearly feel the pressure increasing. He knew that he could not drag on any longer. He had to admit that the effects of the Sword Tempest Cyclone's training were outstanding, but even so he definitely did not want to experience it a second time. He did not even have the courage to recall it. He did not even know how he had endured through that period of time. He was not sure if he could endure it a second time. It was rare for him to have such a mentality. One must know that he was definitely not a cowardly person. The Sword Tempest Cyclone was like an inflated balloon, expanding at an astonishing rate. The number of sword auras were also increasing at an astonishing rate. The pain was also increasing at an astonishing rate. The rate of holy flames surging in was increasing, and the number of emulated law cores that Tang Tian needed to destroy was also increasing, and the holified energy was also increasing. But he knew that he could not allow anything to happen to him, and at the same time he bit his tongue. The sweet taste of blood spread in his mouth, causing his mind to wake up, and he knew that it was not the time for him to be in a daze. He felt as if his soul was being twisted and trembling. Old Tang immediately stopped trembling and said, "I forgot that you are a ghost." The pain in his entire body was extremely clear, and it was completely different from the previous time. The pain this time was filled with traces of yin coldness. The yin coldness was not dense, but it was extremely penetrative. Tang Tian felt that his entire body was about to freeze, but he knew that the yin coldness had directly permeated into his soul. His muscles and blood vessels were as good as new, without any signs of being frozen. Tang Tian could not count how many sword auras there were or how many holy flames were destroyed. Tang Tian could not count either. He could only use all his strength to destroy the emulated law cores that appeared in his vision, frantically destroying them. He was like a killing machine that did not know what fatigue was. "Master, we have a way to enter the Wei Yiguan continent." The soldier's clothes were tattered, his face was skinny, his eyes were sunken in, and only his eyes revealed a bone-deep hatred. Thus he screamed even more miserably. The two of them snorted at the same time. The two of them were used to such meaningless quarrels. He was truly feeling the pain of being stuffed. The sword auras felt as though they were slicing his flesh. The pain of being stuffed made him feel as though he could explode at any moment. The inhuman pain was causing him to almost faint. He wished that he could faint, but he did not have the chance to do so. Old Tang was silent. He knew the logic behind it. If not, the savage army would not have been stuck here for so long. But when he heard the answer, he could not conceal his disappointment. He had initially thought that with the old commander's standard he might have a good idea. Tang Tian frantically used his law threads to attack the emulated law cores, as though only by being in a frenzy could he barely focus. He felt his mind going numb, the light in his eyes dimming, but his movements did not slow down. Old Tang suddenly trembled. Why is it a little cold?" Countless laws and emulated law cores were destroyed at the same time. "Old man, you better not let me find you." Humph humph. He did not notice that the undying sword was like a dried-up sand dune, greedily devouring the holified energy. Xin felt as though he was a balloon. The holified energy was squeezing in from all parts of his body. That's right, it was squeezing in. At the start they needed to absorb it by themselves, but now they did not want to, but the vast amount of holified energy was forcefully squeezing into his body from all directions. But at that moment he could not stop. Even if his soul was trembling in pain, he could not stop. The holy flames that were not dealt with, if they were to slip through and transform into sword auras, it would destroy Xian and the rest. Sigh, he suddenly inhaled a breath of cold air, his expression froze and his face turned pale white. Old Tang turned and asked unwillingly, "Is there no other way?" Bang! Screams came out incessantly. He was unable to control himself. The pain in his body, no, it was the pain in his soul. His mind suddenly surfaced the scene of Clan Elder Seuss struggling in the holy flames, especially the scene of his soul struggling, although it was silent, but anyone who saw that scene would feel the terrifying pain. At this moment, a soldier who had just finished paying his respects walked over with a heavy gait. The holified energy was like seawater flowing backwards, trying its best to squeeze into his body. Strand after strand, it was like being pricked by needles. His entire body was in pain, his entire body was in pain, his entire body was in pain. The only thing that comforted him was that the pain was evenly distributed. His gaze looked at the soldiers who were paying their respects to Mu Jixia's grave, and he could not help but sigh. He was an old-fashioned general and had special feelings for the soldiers, and could not bear to see such a scene. How could the soldiers have the spirit of the #1 army under the heavens? Their faces were withered, their eyes were empty as though they were walking corpses. We can only attack now, but the casualties will be huge. The old commander said helplessly, such an impregnable pass, and the one defending it is Jia, who is proficient in defense. We will not have a chance. I can bring them to take risks, but I cannot bring them to their deaths. Chapter 931. There had never been a time when he yearned for Tang Tian's victory so much. There had never been a time when he yearned to participate in a battle so much. The citizens of the Saint Continent were citizens of Temple, and their life and death had nothing to do with him, but he was still enraged. Xie Yuan believed that if he could see it clearly, Master Bing would definitely see it clearly. But Master Bing still insisted on doing it, and it was obvious that there was a reason why he had to do it. And in the Southern Alliance, there was only one person who could make Master Bing make such a decision, and that was the leader of the Southern Alliance, Tang Tian. Truly too tragic. Master Tang Tian had disappeared for a period of time, and Master Bing was the one handling the daily work. Master Bing's arrangements were very orderly, and the results were obvious, causing the Southern Alliance's strength to take a qualitative leap. Compared to them, Master Tang Tian did not seem to have any presence. But the true core members of the Southern Alliance were clear that Master Tang Tian's role in the Southern Alliance was irreplaceable. No matter how well Master Bing did, he was still unable to replace Master Tang Tian. Alright, maybe I am thinking too much. Dooku was not too satisfied. Compared to the golden holy flames, the ethereal flames that he was imitating were much cruder. Alright, I can only make do with it for now. After the battle ends, I can slowly research on it. The time for an all-out attack is ripe. He had seen all sorts of cruel things in the Sin domain, but none of them were as terrifying as the scene in front of him right now. He was unable to imagine, how crazy must one be to do such a deranged thing. Furthermore, Xie Yuan had a guess in his heart that he did not tell anyone. He suspected that Master Bing had infiltrated the Honorable Martial Continent. He had deduced this from all sorts of clues, for example Master Bing's deployment in the battlefield, which seemed to be intentionally attracting the attention of the Honorable Martial Continent. He had a feeling that if Master Tang Tian was in the Honorable Martial Continent, he would definitely flip the entire Honorable Martial Continent upside down. He then realized that he had underestimated Temple in the past. The depth of Temple's foundation was truly revered. Their eyes flashed with a look of excitement, but their faces maintained their calmness. In the field of laws, he was a true Grand Master, and there were very few people that could earn his respect. Against such a crazy enemy, the slightest bit of carelessness or underestimation could very well lead to one's death. Thinking of this, Xie Yuan suddenly felt a little puzzled. Usually he didn't feel that Sir Tang Tian had any sense of existence. Why did he feel that Sir Tang Tian was a good leader? Xie Yuan thought about it. The last time he felt that Master Bing's emotions were not right, and today he had completely confirmed the guess in his heart. To him, the opportunity to attack was not ripe enough. Mo Xen, Chiu Su Hua and Go Qing Wendao were suspicious of each other, but they maintained their restraint. Dooku only felt a bone-piercing chill from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. All the hairs on his body stood up. He could not help but shiver. After returning to the Sacred Saint Galaxy, he had always felt that the citizens of the Sacred Saint Galaxy were living a comfortable and happy life, and felt that the citizens of the Sin domain were living in a harsh and cruel environment. However, the scene in front of him shattered this impression. He raised his head and looked at the thick fiery pillar and the flowing holy flames in the sky, as well as the blossoming holy flames floating in the air. His gaze landed on the blossoming holy flames. Every single holy flame was not big. Most of them were the size of a finger, and the largest was not bigger than a fist. But there were too many of them, like the sand in the Ganges River. They were uncountable. The holy flames were a form that existed between laws and energy, but in the end, they did not break away from the boundaries of laws and energy. As they flew, the carefree look on Dooku's face disappeared, and what replaced it was seriousness. Initially, he thought that Temple had used holy flames to seal the estuary, but very quickly he realized that the number of holy flames was much more than he had imagined. When he rushed out of the holy flames near the estuary and saw the gigantic fiery pillars that held up the sky, His face completely changed. After the shock and fear, his expression became even more serious. He did not say anything, but instead he supported Master Bing's decision. Although it was not the best time to attack, but Master Tang Tian's importance far outweighed the possible losses. Dooku was overwhelmed with shock. Could they be massacring the city? The creator of the holy flames walked a different path. The changes in laws and energy were astonishing in his hands. He was like a sorcerer of the law domain. He pulled the laws and energy into the shadows, turning the real into the void. These 4 words had reached the pinnacle in his hands. The virtual laws, the void energy, the unique yet ingenious balance. It was like a work of art, releasing an indescribable beauty. Dooku took a deep breath. His heart seemed to have a raging fire burning. Master Tang Tian's importance to the Southern Alliance was without a doubt, and sacrificing a few armies for him was an acceptable loss. But if anything were to happen to the master, no matter how good their advantage was, it would be useless in the grand scheme of things. Different from the past, Bing did not have a cigarette in his hand. He stood in front of the map with a solemn expression. A large number of holy flames floated in the sky. The blossoming golden holy flames were like golden dandelions that stretched endlessly. Chapter 932. There's a situation here. Huoli Ruo shouted excitedly and waved his hands at everyone. All the holy flames nearby were swept up by the Sword Tempest cyclone, and they did not have to worry about holy flames appearing out of nowhere. Without needing to use energy, Zhou and the rest quickly recovered their strength, and their fighting capabilities were completely restored. Upon seeing Huoli Ruo and the rest, they immediately spread out and maintained their vigilance. Was it caused by Macefield tradings? Huolu Shang felt that he was a joke. He was still feeling melancholy at such a time. He bowed to Chia. This subordinate will bring my people over. Wait a minute. Ever since he was young, this point had been deeply imprinted in his mind, but the patriarch's actions had completely toppled his impression of him. But when they arrived at temple, it was empty. All they saw was the holy flames flying towards the fiery pillar near temple. Countless of holy flames entered the fiery pillar. The size of the fiery pillar did not change, but Huolu Shang could sense a terrifying aura brewing inside the fiery pillar. He had a premonition that the 14 monsters were far more terrifying than anyone could imagine. The fiery pillar that they saw previously in the face of the gigantic cyclone was as quiet as a gentleman. Even the speed at which it devoured everything was on a completely different level. Temple's fiery pillar was like a well-educated gentleman, slowly eating the food on the table. But the cyclone in front of them was like a wild beast that had been released from a cage. It devoured everything. Its stomach was like a bottomless pit that could never be filled. After Huolu Shang made the decision, he immediately felt relaxed. He looked at the cyclone. He knew that the only thing that could deal with this monster was another monster. He also knew that Temple would not accept their surrender, and they would definitely not surrender to Temple. After massacring the entire Saint Continent, why would they care about killing a few more captives? If I keep them, what if this matter is leaked? Huolu Shang was shocked. He initially thought that Senior Xen was the leader, but never expected that Senior Xen was actually the beautiful lady's subordinate. What surprised him even more was that the leader of this group of people was actually this woman's husband. I will go too. Snow City? Huolu Shang was startled, but then he quivered and became extremely excited. He did not say anything and just quietly walked forward. But no one came to ask them to surrender, as though Temple's people were all asleep. Sandra raised his head blankly. His pupils suddenly contracted and his wrinkled face instantly turned pale. Suddenly, a terrifying thought flashed through his mind. Could the Great Elder and the others be inside these fire pillars? Huolu Shang followed Huoli Ruo's finger. His eyes immediately lit up. That's right, a portion of the holy flames did not float towards Temple, but towards another direction. Is it finally here? The past few days had been like a nightmare. Seeing the soul struggling frantically in the holy flames, everyone could feel the pain and agony contained within the silent and frenzied movements. The morale in the camp was extremely low. They did not doubt that as long as Temple sent someone out to ask them to surrender, more than half of them would immediately change sides. He was truly agitated at such a time. Any change was a good thing for them. The situation was already at its worst, and even if there was a bad change, the result would not be too bad. But what if it is a good change? The powerful honorable martial continent has fallen to such a state in the blink of an eye. I am also one of the sinners. Huo Lushang was in a daze. His entire body seemed to have been sucked dry. Such a terrifying enemy, how can we win? He counted. There were a total of 14 fiery pillars that were continuously devouring the holy flames. It was a spectacular and shocking scene. Huo Lushang raised his head in a stupefied manner. He looked at the endless holy flames surging towards them. The fear in his heart had reached an unprecedented level. The first thought in his mind was to escape. He forcefully suppressed the impulse in his heart. The entire Saint Continent is sealed. Where can I escape to? He stared at the 14 fiery pillars that were like 14 bottomless mouths that were devouring everything. Huo Lushang knew that it was useless to say anything. Even he himself felt the same way. That's right, isn't this the direction of Snow City? I am Huo Lushang, representing the Huo family. I request for senior's protection. Huo Lushang knelt on the ground and said word by word. He became extremely serious. The entire Huo family will believe in senior. Anyways, let's go take a look. That's right, it's better than this. Huo Li Ruo's heart moved. He raised his head and carefully observed the holy flames in front of him. Huo Lushang could only rely on Macefield tradings. He knew that he did not have any leeway to bargain, because he did not have any bargaining chips. He had no other choice. If the great clan elder truly won, it would be a disaster for the honorable martial continent. To their families it would be a calamity. He noticed that Huo Li Ruo's expression was strange, and with a thought he knew that Huo Li Ruo had discovered something and asked without hesitation, "What's the situation?" Everyone was startled and kept quiet. But his voice was trembling, revealing the excitement in his heart, causing the others to react and immediately ran over. Huo Li Ruo was at a loss, but after a moment he reacted and laughed bitterly. Even at this time, are you still not giving up? Although the opponent was strong, Tang Tian was definitely not someone who would sit and wait for death. Seeing so many holy flames surging towards Tang Tian, Dooku's heart was moved. Could it be that Tang Tian is making use of these holy flames as well? Their situation made it impossible for them to have any other thoughts. The alliance of the big clans only existed in name and was in shambles. Every clan had suffered heavy casualties, at least 30% of them. Even with such a large number of casualties, the fact that the families had not collapsed was because they were well trained. Of course, the most important thing was that there was no way out. In such a despairing place, leaving the family would only lead to faster death. Temple treats its people like pigs and dogs, rearing and slaughtering them to nourish themselves. Your sins are too great, even death cannot atone for your sins. Dooku never thought that in this world, there would actually be such a simple and crude method of building up a strong martial artist. The only thing that gave them a clue was the words, Sin Domain Remnants. But does the Sin Domain have such a powerful person? This was really too powerful, and he looked very young. The great clan elder sensed Dooku's threat and was surprised. His eyes flashed. So it's the Sin Domain Remnants. The holy flames that filled the sky transformed into a 300 m tall wave that struck towards Dooku with an earth-shattering force, causing the entire sky to tremble. In the past, the reason why Sadra and the rest were unhappy with their current situation and dared to fight with Temple for power was because of their confidence, the ambition of a prestigious family. They believed that they were the true masters of the honorable martial continent, and believed that they had the qualifications to rule over the honorable martial continent alongside Temple. Countless of gold threads that looked like blood vessels in a human body converged onto a spirit general's body from all parts of the fiery pillar. Dooku then realized, spirit generals, so the strange flames were prepared for these spirit generals. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible, and his heart was filled with curiosity. Tang Tian had always been a person who did not play by the rules, and he was not surprised at all by what he came up with. Alright, if he doesn't come up with something strange, then Dooku will find it strange. It was just that the environment was disadvantageous to him, but he was not alone. He quickly calmed down, although the opponent was powerful, but he had absolute confidence in himself. That's right, even with his law domain the opponent could still threaten him, but at the same time, no matter how vast the opponent's power was, his law domain could still threaten the opponent. Sadra and the rest were completely dumbstruck. They did not recognize Dooku, but they saw that he was actually able to ignore the restrictions and fly in the sky, and was even able to fight with the great clan elder without being at a disadvantage. Time continued to pass, and the atmosphere in Snow City became more and more oppressive. The soldiers who were in charge of observing Temple's 14 fiery pillars came back to report that there were some changes to them. With that, he ignored Dooku, but the speed at which he absorbed the holy flames increased greatly. He immediately increased his speed, stepping on the holy flames as though he was gliding on water. His speed was extremely fast. The terrifying holy flames did not harm him at all. Everyone prayed to the gigantic storm, hoping that their monster would be able to win. Dooku's face remained gloomy. He could sense the power of the spirit generals, which was a power that he had never seen before. There were no profound and unfathomable realms, only the accumulation of power. To him, there was no technique involved in the accumulation of power, but the immense amount of power was forcefully causing the spirit generals to transform time and time again. They finally knew that they were just mortals and the war was between monsters. At that moment, they no longer had the time to lament their stupidity. Their strength meant that they could only be side characters in the war, and all of their ambitions were built upon their strength. When Sadra and the rest saw the numb faces of their people reigniting with hope, the pain in their hearts lessened. All of the holy flames around Snow City were sucked dry by the Sword Tempest cyclone, and the soldiers who were tortured to the point of breaking down fell asleep. It was the ultimate accumulation of power, tyrannical beyond compare. They had chosen to rely on Tang Tian, which meant that they had completely given up on the pride of being the highest family in the food chain, and from then on, they were thrown into the mortal world. They did not know that in the sky behind them, Dooku was currently observing the fiery pillars with a stern expression. As he had imitated the holy flames, he had deceived the restrictions in the sky and was able to fly. Finally, I can sleep peacefully. They suddenly reacted. Wasn't the Sin Domain martial artist flying towards Snow City? Dooku squinted his eyes without making a sound, but his heart was in a perilous state. He finally understood why Temple needed so many holy flames. He could even sense that the 14 fiery pillars had established some sort of connection with the other fiery pillars through the fiery screen in the sky, allowing them to continuously absorb the holy flames floating around the Saint Continent. Sadra and the rest had a premonition that the monsters inside the fiery pillars had already completed their transformation, and could come out at any time. Such a heavy casualty was a huge blow to any family. Everyone looked at each other, then immediately turned and ran back towards Snow City. It's Tang Tian. Dooku looked at the fiery pillars deeply, then turned and headed towards another direction. He could sense a portion of the holy flames surging towards another direction. Furthermore, he could sense a familiar aura from that direction. Just the pure power was enough to threaten his laws. This caused them to feel panic. The Sword Tempest cyclone was still expanding without any signs of stopping. If the Great Clan Elder and the rest were to come out first, they would be in a dangerous situation, and from the looks of it, the situation was developing in a direction that they did not want to see. Dooku could sense the terrifying aura contained within the fiery pillars. The holy flames were unable to block his gaze. His gaze was like a sword that pierced through the fiery pillars, and he could see everything inside clearly. This ambition did not come out of nowhere, nor was it obtained from the accumulation of wealth, but it was the foundation that their ancestors used their blood and hands to create. It was the continuous accumulation of victories over the generations, the accumulation of countless of glory, and the accumulation of time and months to form their conviction as a prestigious family. That's right, the spirit generals inside every fiery pillar emitted an aura that resembled gigantic beasts that crawled out from the prehistoric era. Even from afar, he could sense the ferocious and terrifying auras coming from the spirit generals. They did not know how to restrain their auras, and every single spirit general's body seemed to be formed from a compressed ocean of holy flames. The undulations produced by the massive amount of energy that was compressed to the extreme could not be concealed at all. He could clearly see that the space around the spirit generals inside the fiery pillars was distorted, and the laws were extremely chaotic. Dooku was shocked. The opponent has discovered me. Just at that moment, the spirit general inside the most central fiery pillar suddenly opened his eyes. The cold gaze that seemed to have substance shot towards Dooku. The great clan elder's face darkened. He knew that he could not do anything to Dooku and sneered, "You're just trying to talk big. The winner is the king, the loser is the bandit. Let's see if you can still smile when the time comes." Every single spirit general inside could threaten him. He had gained enlightenment on laws to the extreme, and possessed an unparalleled power in his own domain, but the spirit general's body contained a power that was even more vast than what he could use. Anything that reached the extreme could change many things. So powerful. Dooku's figure appeared once again. He was like a boulder in a mountain stream. The holy flames were like water that flowed past him. He was unharmed, his expression was normal, but his tone was sonorous and powerful. Dooku also knew that he was unable to move or stop the opponent. The entire fiery pillars of the Saint Continent and the fiery screen in the sky were one. If he attacked any one of the fiery pillars, it meant that he had to face all of them and he had no chance of winning. Chapter 934. For a few days, yes. Fu Jingji glanced at Dooku. He was secretly worried for Master Dooku. Why is Master Dooku only concerned about spirit generals? Why can't he grasp the main point? He couldn't help but remind, they are all Miss Chia's subordinates and Miss Chia is Sir's fiancée. I was wondering which girl was so beautiful and elegant. So it's the boss's wife. The boss was really lucky. Look, he had made a fortune. We are also blessed. With the lady boss's leadership, we will definitely take fewer detours. We will definitely be invincible and destroy all those who stand in our way. Xiaodu, the moment I saw Lady Boss, I felt that she was a kindred spirit. Now that they knew that their master had such a powerful expert under him, their morale was greatly boosted, and the hope in their hearts increased a little. The people below who had already broken down, all knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. They begged the Grand Elder in the sky, crying. In the eyes of Sadra and the rest, whoever became the master of the honorable martial continent was better than Temple. Besides, it was closely related to their life and death. Be it holy flames or spirit generals, they were all illusory objects. But when the two were combined and developed to the extreme, it would return to the void and enter the real. His body was not illusory but real. This body was suffused with a faint golden color, which added a bit of majesty and holiness to him. Every movement he made, the surging power in his body was like a vast ocean. Facing the holy flame, the first thing they did was to suffer heavy casualties. Sin Domain's number 1 stared blankly at the storm above Snow City, his mouth wide open, his expression sluggish. Spirit General? We have spirit generals too? They are all spirit generals? Dooku immediately became excited. Could it be that Master has the same idea as Temple? Treacherous. It was too treacherous. What kind of nonsense was this? It was simply too endearing. Alas, I used to be such an upright young man, but I've been corrupted by the adults. Seeing the middle-aged man calling out little Du, Jizai and Fu Jingji felt a chill down their spines, and goosebumps appeared on their skin. If the aristocratic alliance suffered heavy casualties, then the newly rising prestigious sects were in a state of distress. The armies in their hands were not as well trained as the prestigious family's alliance, and their cohesiveness was also lacking. The Great Elder was cautious by nature, and the sudden appearance of Dooku made him feel uneasy. Although this trace of uneasiness was fleeting, he still decided to increase his bargaining chips. Alright, after seeing this spectacular scene that could elevate his soul, he was not worried at all. That's right, if this fellow doesn't stir up some trouble, is he still Lord Tang Tian? But very quickly his face darkened. He thought about the Sin Domain survivor that he had met previously, and the other party's strength had surprised him. If he had not completed his transformation, he would not have been able to fight against him. The great clan elder could tell that the other party trained in laws. But the depth of his realm was unfathomable. Like that, to have 2 more experts, not bad, not bad. If the old man in the temple's fiery pillar knows about this, will he cry? Thinking about that, the great clan elder could not help but reveal a smile. My plan is so closely linked, how can it be so easily broken? Inside the fiery pillar in the center of temple, the great clan elder slowly opened his eyes. At the moment, only 40% of the people were still alive. 30% of the prestigious alliances were dead, while the various families were still able to maintain their organization. All of the new prestigious families had lost 60% of their members, and all of the families were in chaos. Fu Jingji spoke respectfully. Yes, they are all spirit generals, and their soldiers are all spirit generals as well, a total of 120 of them. Dooku's face was filled with passion, as though he had seen a long-lost relative. The people below who had long collapsed were all crying tears of joy. This is your last chance. Only by stepping through this door of repentance can you obtain salvation. Dooku was in a good mood. The 14 powerful auras had impacted him greatly. He lowered his head to look at his own palms, which were initially translucent, but had completely congealed. Other than the faint gold color, it was no different from a living person's palm. Even the warmth of flesh was the same. His body was the same, completely congealed as though it was alive. Although the other party had stepped into the law domain, but the current Saint Continent was still his home ground. The 500 over pillars of punishment were like 500 nails, firmly nailed into every corner of the Saint Continent, allowing him to firmly grasp the situation. Remember, every single person only has one chance. Who are Xian and Xiaoran? Dooku, who had relaxed, asked casually. These two names are somewhat unfamiliar. Are they new? Since I need to grasp more bargaining chips, I can only let them take advantage of me. The great clan elder looked at the holy flames in the sky and sneered. Xiao Du. The other party is an enemy and not a friend. There is no possibility of reconciliation between Sin Domain and Temple. When the great clan elder finished speaking, the survivors below immediately surged towards the doors of repentance. The great clan elder waved his hand, and the nearby pillars of punishment released a golden flame flow, which flew to the front of the great clan elder and transformed into a golden light door. Don't think too much, we shouldn't be thinking about such things. Mo Gu suddenly spoke up. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.